The hall of the Geneva Global Development Forum was shining with polished wood, glass panels, and the low hum of whispers in many languages. It was a summit of power where billionaires, ministers, and scientists collided to shape the future of global health. Among them, seated quietly near the back, was a man many did not recognize at first glance. President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. He wore no suit, just a crisp white shirt and a simple West African bubu. No entourage, no fanfare, just presence. He had come with a plan, one his team had been crafting in secret for over a year. It wasn't about aid. It wasn't about charity. It was about transformation. When it was his turn to speak, the moderator, a Swiss executive with a practiced smile, read his name with vague confusion. President Traoré of Burkina Faso, please. As Traoré stepped up, a few attendees exchanged glances. A few smartphones tilted up. Some expected a polite plea for donations. What they got was something else. He didn't ask for help. He presented a blueprint. Imagine, Traoré said, a continent where a child in the most remote village can be diagnosed using an AI app in their mother's hands, where data on malaria, waterborne illness, and malnutrition is collected, processed, and solved in real time, not in New York, not in Geneva, but in Ouagadougou. His voice was calm, measured, but every word hit like a drumbeat. We call it the Savannah Code Project, a network of AI-driven health innovation hubs built for Africans, by Africans. Data sovereignty, medical equity, a new model. At the back, a few tech consultants nodded with interest, but many in the room looked politely skeptical. A man from a major European health NGO whispered, "They can't even keep the lights on. Now they want to run machine learning?" The laughter wasn't loud, but it echoed. Traoré didn't flinch. Instead, he pulled a small tablet from his pocket. It showed real-time data from a rural health post in northern Burkina Faso. As we speak, he said, a child with a fever is being diagnosed not by a traveling doctor, but by a solar-powered AI-assisted health unit trained on 5 years of regional disease patterns. The screen updated. The case was marked treated. Still, the silence in the room was stiff. Some clapped politely. Others stayed still. It was after the session, when the crowd dispersed for lunch, that someone finally approached him. She wore glasses, a calm expression, and a name tag that read, Melinda Gates Foundation. President Traoré, she said. We were listening. That moment changed everything. 3 days later, Traoré sat across from Bill Gates himself in a private meeting room atop a quiet floor of the Intercontinental Geneva. The room had no press, no cameras, just a thermos of coffee and 2 men from wildly different worlds. Gates, relaxed but sharp-eyed. Traoré, focused, quiet, respectful. Tell me, Gates said, tapping the tablet Traoré had presented. How much of this is real? All of it, Traoré replied. Gates raised an eyebrow. My country has no legacy infrastructure, Traoré explained. That's an advantage. We're not trying to digitize a broken system. We're building a new one, from scratch, designed for today's tools. Solar-powered devices, cloud backups, AI tailored for African illnesses. And who's building it? Traoré smiled. Teachers, students, coders, soldiers who once guarded borders now map malaria outbreaks. Farmers' sons now label medical datasets. Gates listened carefully. When Traoré finished, Gates said just 4 words, show me your base. Back in Ouagadougou, a dusty courtyard outside a former colonial school buzzed with activity. Computers hummed inside newly built classrooms. Solar panels lined the rooftops. Young developers sat side by side with nurses, entering case files, refining diagnostics, improving predictions. When Gates arrived weeks later, he did so unannounced. Just 2 advisors, no entourage. The hub didn't clean up for him. They didn't put up banners. They just kept working. Gates walked slowly through the rooms, occasionally stopping to ask questions. A girl no older than 20 explained how their AI flagged cholera outbreaks before the first patient hit the clinic. Where did you learn this? Gates asked. Online, she shrugged. And then here, he turned to Traoré. You're doing something rare. Most governments talk about innovation, You built a place where it happens. Traoré nodded. We had no choice. That night, under the stars outside the presidential palace, Gates and Traoré spoke quietly over dinner. We funded a lot of health innovation, Gates said. But this, you're combining sovereignty with technology, ownership. It's impressive. We can't ask the world to solve our problems, Traoré replied. But we can invite the world to help us scale our solutions. Gates smiled. 3 weeks later, the Gates Foundation made a quiet but powerful announcement. It would partner with Burkina Faso to pilot the world's first AI-driven rural health hub network, with training, funding, and shared tech development. The Savannah Code project had just been launched onto the global stage. In the weeks following the initial message to the Gates Foundation, President Ibrahim Traoré's team worked tirelessly. The quiet warehouse on the outskirts of Ogo became a think tank of innovation and discipline. The project had evolved from a dream into a blueprint, and now into a prototype. Unlike Tesla's energy ambitions, which were hardware-intensive, this initiative required intellectual infrastructure. The goal wasn't to build a tech factory. It was to develop Africa's first Pan-African research and development hub, dedicated to climate-resilient agriculture and affordable healthcare technology. Traoré, ever the tactician, focused on 3 verticals: drought-resistant crops using AI-driven genetics, open-source diagnostic tools, and solar-powered cold chains for vaccine and food preservation. Musa and Aminata, now co-leads of the technical core, divided their team into specialized pods. Each pod consisted of engineers, scientists, community workers, and even a few artists. Design is not cosmetic, Aminata said. It's dignity. A diagnostic tool should be beautiful and understandable to a grandmother in a rural clinic. Within 21 days, they produced early prototypes, a handheld diagnostic reader that worked offline and required no electricity, a collapsible solar refrigeration unit small enough to be carried by motorbike, a seed modification protocol using CRISPR, tailored to Burkina Faso's soil and climate. The data was clean, the concepts were disruptive, but still there was silence from Seattle. Then one morning, the message came. An encrypted reply from the Gates Foundation, not from a secretary, not from a program officer, but from Bill Gates himself. President Traoré, your proposal is bold. I admire that. We have seen many pitches from governments, but yours stands out in its clarity, courage, and unwillingness to rely on pity. I would like to see your work with my own eyes. I am coming to Ouagadougou. Sincerely, Bill Gates. The room exploded in disbelief when Traoré read the message aloud. How do we even prepare for this? Musa asked. We don't prepare for him, Traoré said. We prepare for the truth. We show him who we are. Over the next 2 weeks, the team conducted mock walkthroughs of the warehouse lab. They translated all technical material into plain language. They installed a translation system in case Gates wanted to speak to rural leaders in real time. They planted the corridor leading into the lab with native flora, a quiet nod to the roots of their land. On the morning of Gates's arrival, the capital was buzzing. Security was tight but subtle. There were no red carpets, no ceremonial drums, just a single black SUV rolling to a quiet stop outside the warehouse. Bill Gates stepped out, wearing a light blue shirt and khaki pants. No entourage, no press, just a leather notebook in his hand. President Traoré greeted him with a warm handshake. Mr. Gates, he said, welcome to the silence. That's what you call your team. Traoré nodded. The world didn't listen to us, so we worked in silence. Inside the warehouse, the silence team stood ready, not in suits, in lab coats, field gear, and work boots. Musa began the tour, showing the diagnostic reader first. This works entirely offline, zero electricity needed. We designed it for rural clinics with no power grid. Gates took the device in his hand, turned it over, and examined the materials. Open source software? Yes, sir, Musa said. Freely licensed. We want countries to adapt it without barriers. Aminata led the second station, demonstrating the collapsible solar refrigerator. It's meant for mobile clinics and market vendors, built from recycled plastics sourced locally. Gates looked impressed. Where did you get the design inspiration? From a mango seller, Aminata replied. She needed something that worked between 5 a.m. and noon, before the sun spoiled her fruit. At the third station, Traoré himself presented the CRISPR protocol. "We don't want to control food systems," he said. "We want to decolonize them." Bill Gates raised an eyebrow. "That's a strong word, but the right one," Traoré answered. "Our seeds shouldn't be owned by corporations." They ended the tour at a table with 4 chairs. No speeches, just a shared meal of local millet, grilled vegetables, and shea tea. "You came to see innovation," Traoré said. "Now we ask you to see our values." Gates looked around the room. Then he opened his notebook. "I have a few ideas," he said. Outside, the streets of Ouagadougou remained unaware of what was happening in that quiet warehouse. But inside, something monumental had begun. A partnership, built not on charity, but on parity. The conference room inside the Ministry of Innovation had never hosted someone like Bill Gates before. It had been quickly renovated the week prior. New lights, freshly painted walls, reinforced internet connectivity, and discreet security upgrades. But President Ibrahim Traoré insisted that it still feel humble, honest, and uniquely Burkinabe. On the morning of Gates's visit, the entire government complex operated with quiet, efficient purpose. No red carpets, no blaring horns, just readiness. At exactly 9 a.m., the gates opened, and a modest motorcade pulled in. Bill Gates stepped out in a light blue button-down shirt and khakis, holding a leather notebook under one arm. He wore no tie, no watch, only a calm smile and curious eyes. President Traoré met him at the front steps. The two shook hands. "Mr. Gates," Traoré said with warmth. "Welcome to Burkina Faso." "Mr. President," Gates replied, "I've been curious about your country for a long time. Now I'm here to learn." They moved inside, followed by a small entourage of advisors and security on both sides. Gates had brought 2 experts in health systems and sustainable agriculture. Traoré was flanked by Aminata, Musa, and a young public health official named Dr. Yara, who had been handpicked for this moment. The meeting began without ceremony. President Traoré opened a laptop and began presenting the updated Volta Rebirth blueprint. Not just a factory, but an ecosystem. Solar-powered water purification systems, a modular vaccine storage network, a school tablet program that ran on offline solar stations. Bill Gates leaned forward, flipping through the accompanying printed brief. "These numbers are bold," he said, tapping a chart showing projected regional healthcare improvements. "Where's your medical manufacturing capacity?" "Not here yet," Traoré admitted. "But we have designs for small-scale bioreactor labs in the second phase. Our goal is not just to distribute vaccines, but to produce some of them. Africa needs that independence." Gates looked up sharply. "That's a significant jump." "It is," Aminata said, "but we've already started training biomedical students. The talent is here. What we lack is investment and open-source tech collaboration." Gates nodded slowly. "And the cold chain logistics," Musa chimed in, "powered by our lithium battery systems. We've field-tested them in remote regions. We can keep vaccines stable for up to 72 hours off-grid." For a long moment, Gates said nothing. Then he stood and walked to the window. Outside, he saw the edge of the solar test field, shimmering in the dry heat. "Mr. President," he said finally, turning back, "I've visited a lot of countries, seen a lot of promising initiatives that fall apart after the photo ops. But what you're doing here, it's different." Traoré nodded. "Because we're not building this for headlines. You're building it for survival," Gates added. They broke for lunch, grilled tilapia, fresh mango, and sorghum bread. Gates asked to eat with the young engineers and community leaders involved in the pilot villages. One girl, just 19, told him in fluent English, "I used to walk 2 hours just to charge my phone. Now I manage a solar hub for 3 villages. My grandmother thinks I'm an engineer." Gates laughed. "You are." After lunch, the group toured the construction site of the Gigafactory and visited one of the villages newly connected to solar microgrids. There, Gates saw children studying by light that didn't depend on diesel, clinics refrigerating polio vaccines without outages, women using solar-powered grain mills to save 6 hours of labor each day. In the evening, back at the presidential residence, Traoré and Gates sat on the rooftop overlooking Ouagadougou. "I know you're here unofficially," Traoré said, "but I also know your influence. If you believe in this project, others will follow. Gates looked down at the city lights, now brighter than ever before. I don't make promises easily, he said, but I'll tell you this, what I saw today, your vision, your people, it deserves every bit of support it can get. He paused, and I'll help you get it. News of Bill Gates' informal endorsement spread fast, too fast. Within a week of his return to Seattle, international media had picked up the story. The headlines varied in tone. Bill Gates impressed by West African innovation. Burkina Faso's bold bid to lead tech health revolution. Gates visits Africa's impossible gigafactory project. In Ouagadougou, the buzz was electric. Universities invited Traoré to speak. Farmers in distant provinces discussed solar vaccines. Young girls in remote villages talked about becoming engineers like Musa. Something had shifted. Hope, once a cautious whisper, was now a confident hum. But not everyone was pleased. One morning, Aminata walked briskly into President Traoré's office with a file under her arm and worry in her eyes. They're pushing back, she said without preamble. Who? Traoré asked. The usual suspects. 3 European media outlets have released editorials questioning the legitimacy of our energy data. One even called the factory a mirage. And Gates? He asked. They're attacking him too, saying he's risking his foundation's credibility by supporting a nation with unstable governance. Traoré leaned back, unfazed. That means they're scared. Aminata tapped the file. It gets worse. The World Bank just revised their loan conditions for West African infrastructure projects. They're tightening restrictions on solar investments, unless they're tied to European suppliers. Colonialism by spreadsheet, Traoré muttered. That afternoon, an anonymous letter was delivered to the palace, postmarked from Paris. It warned of serious diplomatic consequences if Burkina Faso attempted to produce vaccine components without approval from existing Western pharma partners. Traoré read the letter silently. Then he tore it in half. They don't want us to die, he said. They just want us to stay dependent. That night, he convened an emergency meeting with the silence team, Bill Gates on secure video call. They're going to block us, Traoré said, through legal threats, trade barriers, disinformation, anything short of war. They tried the same thing in India when we opened generic drug factories. Gates said, you know what changed it? What? Proof. Real-world success. Once the outcomes are undeniable, even the loudest critics go quiet. Then we accelerate, Musa said. Finish phase 1 ahead of schedule. Traoré turned to Gates. Can you help us license basic open source components? Enough to get our micro facilities running before they freeze us out? I'll call my team, Gates said. But be ready. They'll come harder. We're used to that, Traoré replied. Over the next 6 weeks, Burkina Faso transformed into something like a controlled storm. The gigafactory doubled shifts. Training centers began 24-hour rotation classes. Government fast-tracked clearance for the construction of 3 modular vaccine production units, using designs provided through Gates's network. Ghana offered surplus engineers. Rwanda sent consultants. Even Cuba discreetly offered lab expertise. But the pressure kept coming. 2 international banks froze ongoing loans. A shipment of solar panel parts was delayed in port under regulatory review. And in France, a senior official stated publicly, Burkina Faso is experimenting with a scale of independence that may endanger regional harmony. In response, Traoré made a bold move. He called a press conference. Standing alone before dozens of cameras and microphones, he spoke not with defiance, but with clarity. We are not declaring war on anyone. We are declaring independence from waiting. If others wish to help us, we welcome them. If not, we move forward regardless. Then he turned to the final question from a reporter. Do you really believe Burkina Faso can succeed where richer countries struggle? Traoré smiled. Others build for profit. We build because we have no choice. That's the difference. The next morning, an open letter appeared in the Lancet, co-signed by over 200 African doctors, scientists and health economists. We stand with Burkina Faso. The era of waiting for permission to survive is over. Traoré read it over breakfast, a smile tugging at his lips. He folded the newspaper and said to himself, let's finish this. 6 months after Bill Gates's visit to Burkina Faso, the first test of the country's revolutionary health tech initiative arrived, not in a press release or a ribbon-cutting ceremony, but in the form of a disease. An outbreak of a new malaria strain hit northern Ghana, spreading fast into rural Burkina Faso. The symptoms were slightly different. Existing treatments worked, but required rapid response. Traditional vaccine supply chains couldn't keep up. Within 72 hours, President Ibrahim Traoré was on a call with the Ministry of Health and the Silence team. "We can wait for aid," the minister said, "or we can test the factory." Traoré didn't hesitate. Deploy the factory. Inside the Volta Rebirth complex, alarms didn't sound, but everyone moved faster. Aminata coordinated logistics. Musa recalibrated the micro-lab units. Within 48 hours, Burkina Faso's modular vaccine line, developed in partnership with Bill Gates' foundation, had synthesized the first batch of region-specific doses. The distribution plan was just as revolutionary. Solar-powered drones, programmed by recent university graduates, trained under the Silence Initiative, delivered doses directly to remote clinics. Not weeks later, not days, within hours. For the first time in history, Burkina Faso was not the last to receive medicine. It was the first to respond. International observers were stunned. A representative from the WHO publicly called it an unprecedented display of African innovation in global health. The African Union proposed funding for scaling the model across the continent, and the same banks that had frozen Burkina Faso's loans. They now requested meetings about new infrastructure collaborations. But the most emotional moment came during a live broadcast from a rural clinic where the vaccine was administered to a child named Issa. Her mother, holding back tears, looked into the camera and said, "When I was her age, my brother died from fever. No one came in time. Now, the cure came from us." That clip was watched over 40 million times worldwide. Back in Ouagadougou, Bill Gates visited once more, this time publicly. No secrecy, no backdoor meetings. He walked through the now fully operational gigafactory, smiling as young technicians explained every detail with pride and precision. In a press conference afterward, standing beside Traoré, Gates said, "This is not a story of charity. It's a story of vision, of what happens when you stop asking for permission and start building your own future." Burkina Faso didn't need a handout. They needed belief. A reporter from CNN asked Gates, "Why here? Why now?" Gates looked at Traoré, then answered, "Because sometimes the smartest investment is the one no one else was brave enough to make." Traoré stepped up to the microphone. "And sometimes," he said, "the most powerful revolution is a mother watching her child grow up in a country that no longer waits." 5 years after its inception, the Volta Rebirth complex became a continental model, not just for vaccine development, but for energy independence, modular logistics, and public health resilience. Dozens of African nations sent delegations. Some adopted the full model, others customized it, but all were inspired by the same principle. We can build our own solutions. Young Burkinabe, who once dreamed of moving abroad, now enrolled in the country's new Institute for Sustainable Tech and Health. Satellite campuses opened in Niger, Togo, and Chad. The Silence team, once a secret collective of engineers and visionaries, became a formal think tank consulted by African and international leaders alike. And President Ibrahim Traoré, he remained grounded, still walking the palace garden every morning, still refusing titles, fame, or riches, still asking the same question to every visitor: "What are you building?" In Seattle, a plaque was quietly installed at the Gates Foundation's global headquarters. It read, "In recognition of those who built without applause, led without ego, and proved the impossible was only a delay in courage." And below it 3 words: "Inspired by Burkina Faso."